It is August 23rd, 1305. London wakes beneath a grey, sullen sky. But this is no ordinary morning. The city hums with anticipation, a morbid excitement that ripples through the cobbled streets. From the markets of Cheapside to the shadowed alleys near Westminster, the crowds gather, swelling thicker by the hour. Merchants abandon their stalls, nobles descend from their chambers, peasants pour in from every quarter of the city. They come not for bread, not for prayer, they come for blood. Somewhere in the distance a sound cuts through the murmuring tide, the scrape of wood over stone, the sharp rhythm of hooves striking the street, and beneath it something worse, the sound of flesh dragging over cobblestones, leaving a trail of crimson breadcrumbs for the ravens to follow. The crowd parts like a diseased sea, and there, bound naked to a wooden hurdle, dragged behind a horse, is William Wallace, the man who dared to dream of a free Scotland. His body is a ruin, a map of English fury carved in blood and scars. Every stone on the 400-mile road from Scotland has left its mark. His back is a checkerboard of wounds. His skin hangs in ribbons. Yet, his eyes, God help us, all his eyes still burn. Not with fear, not with regret, but with defiance. Even as filth rains down upon him, even as the mob screams for his death, Wallace refuses to bow. And to understand what brought him here this day, this horror, we must journey back 35 years to a Scotland that once knew peace. The boy from Renfrew. The year is 1270. In the quiet green hills of Renfrew, a child is born to Sir Malcolm Wallace, a minor landowner with modest dreams to tend his fields and serve his lord. They name the boy William, never imagining that this infant will one day have the most powerful king in Europe calling for his blood. William grows tall, strong, and impossibly bright. He learns to read and write, a luxury few in his class enjoy. He studies Latin with monks, mastering the tongue of scholars and priests. But it is his strength that makes him legendary. By the age of 20, William Wallace stands more than 6.5 feet tall, a giant among men, broad-shouldered and fierce-eyed. His sword, 6 feet of tempered steel, seems an extension of his arm. In those days, Scotland is a land at peace. King Alexander III rules with wisdom and strength. The markets flourish, the fields yield fat harvests, and the people sleep unafraid. But peace, as history teaches, never lasts. In 1286, beneath a storm-torn sky, Alexander rides his horse over a cliff near Kinghorn and is killed. With his death, Scotland's golden age ends in a single heartbeat. The crown passes to Margaret, the Maid of Norway, a 3-year-old child who has never seen the land she's meant to rule. For fragile years, Scotland hangs in uneasy balance. Then, in 1290, on her voyage home to claim her throne, young Margaret dies. Scotland is left without a monarch, without a future, and soon, without its freedom. The wolf in the fold. Desperate to avoid civil war, the Scottish nobles turn to Edward I of England, Edward Longshanks. He is a towering man over 6 feet tall, long of limb and longer of ambition. A warrior king, forged in the fire of conquest. Wales has already felt the weight of his iron fist, and now, his gaze turns northward. When Scotland asks him to arbitrate between rival claimants to its vacant throne, the nobles think they are inviting a judge. In truth, they invite a wolf. Edward chooses John Balliol, a man weak of will and easily bent to English command. But the English king's ambitions reach further than mere puppetry. He demands that Scottish nobles pay homage directly to him, that Scottish courts answer to English judges, that Scottish knights serve in his wars. Every demand is another turn of the noose. By 1296, even the meek Balliol can stomach no more. He renounces his vassalage, and in response, Edward unleashes hell. His armies sweep north like a plague. The first city to feel their fury, Berwick-upon-Tweed. The slaughter that follows becomes legend. Men, women, children, butchered without mercy. Chroniclers write of rivers running red, of bodies stacked like timber. 17,000 souls gone in a single day. Berwick is erased from the map. This is the Scotland that shapes William Wallace. This is the crucible in which his defiance is forged, the spark of rebellion. When Edward strips Baliol of his crown, forcing him to kneel in rags before the English court, the young Wallace watches from the shadows. When Scottish nobles, broken and humiliated, bend their knees and sign the Ragman Roll, swearing loyalty to their conqueror, Wallace's jaw tightens, and somewhere deep inside him, something breaks. In May 1297, that spark ignites. The details are blurred by time. Some say it was the murder of his beloved Marion Braidfield, others that it was yet another English outrage too great to ignore. But whatever the cause, when Wallace's sword pierces the heart of William Heselrigg, the English sheriff of Lanark, history changes course. The killing sends tremors across the land. Here, at last, is a man who will fight back. Men vanish from villages and farms, slipping into forests to join him. But Wallace is not a common bandit. He is a tactician, cunning, patient, and fearless. He rallies his countrymen not with promises of riches or glory, but with a single truth. We fight not for wealth or honors, but for freedom which no honest man gives up but with his life. Stirling Bridge. The autumn of 1297 brings destiny to Stirling. Wallace and his ally and Rumore face the full might of England. 15,000 troops against perhaps 6,000. Scots, the English commanders, John de Warenne and Hugh de Cressingham, are so confident of victory that they laugh as they watch from the far bank of the River Forth. The Scots wait atop the high ground of Abbey Craig, watching as the English begin crossing the narrow bridge. Hours pass. Horsemen, infantry, baggage carts all funnel into a single, fragile line. And then Wallace gives the signal. The Scots strike like thunder, charging down from the heights. They fall upon the trapped English with merciless precision. The bridge becomes a slaughterhouse, soldiers crushed, drowned, trampled in their own panic. When Hugh de Cressingham falls, his body is flayed, and his skin turned into belts, a gruesome symbol of vengeance. By nightfall, the field is silent, the invincible English army destroyed. From outlaw to legend, William Wallace becomes guardian of Scotland. For one brief, shining moment, freedom breathes again. But Edward Longshanks does not forgive, and he never forgets. The hammer falls. The following year, 1298, Edward marched north himself with an army vast enough to crush all resistance. At Falkirk, the two forces meet. Wallace's spearmen form tight Shotran's hedgehog formations of pikes brace against English cavalry. They hold firm against wave after wave of mounted knights. But Edward has brought a weapon the Scots cannot match. Welsh longbowmen. Arrows rain down like steel hail. The air fills with the hiss of death. Wallace's men fall by the hundreds, pierced and screaming. The formations shatter. The battlefield dissolves into chaos. John de Graham, Wallace's dearest friend, dies beneath the weight of English steel. Wallace is forced to flee, his dream of freedom crushed beneath a storm of arrows. He resigns his title as guardian. He vanishes from sight. Some say he sails to France to beg aid from Philip IV. Others whisper he reaches Rome itself, pleading his nation's case before the Pope. But history loses him for a time. He becomes a ghost, a name spoken in secret, a symbol of defiance in a land learning to survive under chains. The Lion's Shadow. Word of Wallace's defiance raced across Scotland like wildfire on the wind. Farmers whispered his name as though invoking a saint. Mothers hushed their children with stories of the man who made English knights tremble. For the first time in living memory, hope stirred among the people who had forgotten how to dream. But hope is a dangerous fire. It draws not only warmth but enemies. Edward I. Longshanks was not a man to tolerate rebellion. He had crushed the Welsh and their prince. He would do the same to the Scots, yet even the iron will of England's hammer was tested by a man who refused to kneel. The Battle of Stirling Bridge. It was September 11th, 1297. The River Forth glimmered under a chill morning sun near Stirling. Across it lay the English army, armored and confiding, nearly 10,000 strong. They marched under banners that blazed red and gold. Horses snorted, metal clanged. To them, it was not a battle, it was a hunt. On the far side, Wallace and Andrew Moray waited with barely a third of that number. Farmers, blacksmiths, shepherds, wielding scythes and sharpened stakes. But they held something sharper still: conviction. The English began to cross the narrow bridge, a trickle of knights funneling over the wooden span. Wallace's eyes, cold and still, watched from the ridge. He waited, patient as a hawk. When the English were halfway across, Wallace gave the signal. Now, from behind the hill, his men surged forward with a roar that split the morning sky. Arrows rained, pikes struck, horses reared and fell screaming into the river. The bridge became a trap of bodies, steel, and shattered pride. When it was done, the English army lay in ruin, their confidence drowned in the Forth. Scotland had its first great victory. The impossible had happened. The Guardian of Scotland. In the aftermath, Wallace was named Guardian of Scotland, a title born not from royal decree, but from the will of the people. For the first time in generations, Scotland stood free, if only for a moment. He governed not as a noble, but as a man of the soil. He restored villages, strengthened alliances, and punished traitors. Yet power sat uneasily on his shoulders. Wallace was no politician. His heart belonged to the fight, not the throne. Still, his victory made him a symbol to break for comfort. The Scottish nobles, wary and jealous, began to whisper. England, humiliated, plotted revenge, and Wallace, ever defiant, marched south once more, raiding English towns to remind Longshanks that Scotland still breathed. But glory breeds enemies faster than it breeds loyalty. The fall at Falkirk. In July 1298, Edward I led a massive army north, an army unlike any Scotland had faced. 20,000 men, war horses, archers, and siege engines. Against them, Wallace gathered what forces he could, but the nobles were hesitant. Many deserted him before battle. Still, he stood his ground at Falkirk. The morning of battle was heavy with silence. Wallace's infantry formed, Chiltern's tight circles of spears like hedgehogs of iron. The English knights charged again and again, but the spears held firm, impaling horses mid-gallop. For a moment, it seemed the Scots might prevail once more. Then came the longbows. The English archers unleashed a storm of arrows that darkened the sky. Men fell like wheat before the scythe. The Chilterns broke. The battlefield dissolved into chaos. Wallace fought until his sword shattered. He retreated into the forest, a hunted man once again. Falkirk was not just a defeat. It was a fracture in the dream. The nobles turned on him. The alliances crumbled. Scotland's guardian vanished into legend, the ghost of a nation. For years, Wallace disappeared from the world's sight. Some said he fled to France, seeking aid from the French king. Others claimed he wandered the highlands, a ghost haunting the mystic lands, striking at English patrols like a phantom of vengeance. But the truth was simpler. Wallace never gave up the fight. He became the shadow that England could not catch, the whisper that would not die, and that, for Edward, was unbearable. The betrayal. In 1305, fate dealt its cruelest hand. Wallace was betrayed by one of his own countrymen, Sir John de Menteith. Captured near Glasgow, bound in chains, he was dragged south to London. They paraded him through the streets as though displaying a beast. Crowds jeered, children threw filth, but Wallace's eyes never lowered, not once. In Westminster Hall, he stood before his accusers, charged with treason. He replied with words that echoed through the ages. "I could not be a traitor, for I owe no allegiance to Edward." They found him guilty anyway. His sentence, death by torture. The full measure of England's wrath. The martyrdom. August 23rd, 1305. The morning dawned gray and merciless. They dragged Wallace through the city by horse to Smithfield. He was stripped, beaten, and humiliated but never broken. The executioner waited. The crowd fell silent. They hanged him but cut him down before death could claim him. They disemboweled him, burned his entrails before his eyes, and finally beheaded him. His body was quartered, his limbs sent to the coroners of Britain as a warning. Yet that warning became a rallying cry. In death, Wallace became greater than any army, any king. His courage ignited a generation. Robert the Bruised, who once wavered between crowns and loyalty, found his fire rekindled. Within 9 years, Scotland would rise again, and at Bannockburn, it would break England's grip forever. The legacy. Centuries have passed. Empires have risen and fallen. But William Wallace endures, not merely as the man who fought the English, but as the man who refused to surrender his soul. He was not noble by birth. He had no title, no castle, no armor of gold. What he had was conviction of belief that freedom is not granted, it is earned. That even the smallest man can shake the mightiest throne. Today, his monument stands over the fields of Stirling. From its heights, you can see the river where he turned the tide of a nation. The wind still carries his name across the hills. The stones still remember. For as long as men value liberty over fear, the story of William Wallace will never die. They called him outlaw, traitor, rebel, but history knows better. He was the lion who refused to bow, the man who made a kingdom remember itself, the warrior whose heart beat so fiercely, the echoes still reach us now. And somewhere in the Scottish mist, when the wind howls through the glen and the banners of the past whisper once more,